Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these very tough times. For our first story, rather than sharing ice cream with Tom Hanks, this particular Lieutenant Dan is on track to be the mascot for Cadbury Candy. The two-legged pup from New Richmond, Ohio, is just one of the 10 finalists vying to be the official new Cadbury bunny. Although his Instagram bio says that he was born a little different, he apparently still knows how to live life to the fullest. Assuming Lieutenant Dan wins, he will also be awarded $5,000 in a starring role in the next Cadbury commercial. The treeing Walker Coonhound is competing against a duck from Missouri, a fat cat named Lunchbox, and a no-drama llama named Consuela. If you want to vote for Lieutenant Dan or your other favorite finalists, you can look at the Instagram page to vote for the right one for the Cadbury commercial. Although he does look very, very cute. In other pet news, you can get more than just a pint of beer at this Oregon tap house. Fido's Tap House is being hailed as the world's first bar and restaurant that also doubles as a foster home for pups that were rescued from kill shelters in California. Since the Portland-based establishment opened in 2018, they've helped over 70 different shelter dogs find homes. Fido's founder, Scott Porter, says that he was inspired to launch the tap house after he learned about cat cafes. Additionally, he hopes that foster dogs will give his families, the same kind of love and therapeutic dog support that his own dogs have offered for him. My own dogs have helped me through some pretty severe depression, he told Today in a video interview. They were extremely loving and attentive to me, and they understood that I was going through some tough times. I'm amazed by how intuitive animals are with that sort of thing. They can always tell when something is physically or emotionally wrong with you, and they're there for you right away. I know that's why therapy dogs exist. In this, like, mental health therapy dogs exist, because they can sense these things and they're very sensitive to it, and they're very calming, and like petting them is very calming and loving and makes you feel loved and warm. So this is an absolutely brilliant idea for shelter dogs to be adopted at a bar. I've heard of cat cafes, and Cat cafes are fantastic. If you don't know, cat cafes, you go into a cafe and there's like, you're surrounded by cats, and some of them are for adoption and some of them are not. There's a cat bar in Bristol, UK, that, in London, or Bristol in England, in the UK, that, you go into the bar and there's these cats just all over the bar, and they're so comfortable with the people. It's just incredible, like, to see. They're just so used to just like these patrons coming in and drinking and like what is essentially their home. And they're so like just kind and gentle with everyone there, and they're so like, so sweet, so cute. So this bar, the one that we're talking about, typically accommodates 3 or 4 shelter dogs at a time in a room that is separate from the dining area. Separate from the dining area, which is good if you're planning on dining there, but you are allergic to dogs, but still like the idea. If a potential adopter decides to adopt one of the lucky pups, they are also required to wait 3 days before actually signing the paperwork, which is very smart. You know, because the staffers want to make sure that alcohol didn't influence the decision. So they want to make sure that it's not an impulse adoption. So if you want to learn more about Fido's Tap House, you can visit their website, their Instagram, Twitter, or their Facebook page as well. So you can check those out if you're interested. Or if you're just interested in going to check out the dogs. And maybe if you want to start one in your area, you can talk to them and ask how they started it up. And finally, in this section, Roman McCann may only be 7 years old, but he's rescued over 1,000 dogs from a fatal end. The youngster is the mastermind behind Project Freedom Ride, the charity that saves dogs from euthanasia and pairs them with loving families across the country. Roman and his mother first got the idea for the project after they adopted their own dog in 2015. Troubled by the high rates of euthanasia in Texas, Roman started making videos for shelter dogs as a means of helping them get adopted. Roman's mom also started advocating for no-kill policies to state legislators. Finally, out of a desire to create a kind of underground railroad for pups, they launched Project Freedom Ride in 2016 and completed their first transport mission of 31 dogs from Texas to Washington. Now, the mother-son duo rescues on average over 50 dogs each month. The charity is not technically a transportation-based rescue effort. They say that PFR is mostly a community. It's an effort that is connecting unwanted, abandoned dogs and a few cats, for those of you that are more cat people, who may otherwise be bound for euthanasia in Texas, with families, rescues, and humane societies in the Pacific Northwest. It makes me feel happy saving all these dogs, Roman told Inside Edition. But it doesn't just make me happy. I'm sure it makes all the dogs happy. I am sure you are absolutely right, Roman. You are making a lot of people happy with your efforts. It's always so impressive when someone so young does something like this, isn't it? That's the youth of America, everyone. When we come back from the break, we are going to move on from pets, I'm sorry to say, because we've got a lot to get through in this one here. So we're going to be talking about the one of the world's most eco-friendly places, and some lovely things happening there. And then and then we'll move on to some other things. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Some of these things, I will admit in this episode, are not American-based, but that is because there's a lot going on right now. So we're just going to talk anything that's quite positive and uplifting that we will enjoy and be uplifted by. So I hope that's okay with you, and we'll hear about that when we come back from the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about some shelter adoption efforts and even a very young boy who's doing his best to make sure that animals find the best home. And now, in the tiny country of Bhutan bordering Tibet, King Kaiser and Queen Jetsun announced the birth of a new baby prince on February the 5th. So, how did the citizens celebrate? All 82,000 of the nation's households planted a tree. Volunteers from the country's districts planted an additional 26,000, so the total would add up to a whopping 108,000, a holy number in Buddhism, whose rosary, like malas, hold up to 108 prayer beads. Each tree was planted with an encapsulated prayer, so the trees grew strong and tall over time. And so, with the young prince. In Buddhism, a tree is the provider and nourisher of all life forms, symbolizing longevity, health, beauty, and compassion. Tenzin Lekpo said, who coordinated the initiative. He told the diplomat. It wasn't a coincidence that the Buddha attained enlightenment under a banyan tree. Bhutan is also known as one of the most eco-friendly countries in the world. And in 2013, it became the most eco-friendly country in the world. Due to its turn in agricultural, completely organic, banning the sales of pesticides and herbicides, it's been named the world's happiest nation. On one occasion, after its leaders decided to value the success on a gross national happiness scale rather than on the economic-based gross national product. The primarily Buddhist nation is a democratic monarchy with, as one can easily tell, a much beloved royal family. Another lovely story that was sort of related to this is that typically in Asian cultures, the birth of a girl is considered unfortunate responsibility because of the dowry system that puts a financial burden on the parents. For this reason, daughters were never as celebrated as sons. But in one village in India, the residents honor the birth of their daughter with a unique ritual of planting 111 fruit trees. The number 111 in Indian culture is believed to bring success, and that's exactly the sentiment in which this practice was founded. Through this tradition, every time a girl is born, people of Piplantry, Rajasthan, combat the historical prejudice against daughters and beautify their homeland at the same time. The village's former leader, Shyam Sundar Palwal, first stated the practice in 2006 to honor the death of his daughter, Karen. Wanting to ensure the future's protection and care of female children in the village, he launched a program that would not only enhance the local environment, but also raise money for the girl's family. The notable custom has endured for well over a decade. In order to make sure that young women are always being provided for, the villagers came together to raise 30,000 rupees, which is about $480, to set aside as her fund for the next 20 years. The parents of the child then reciprocate the gesture by signing an oath that their daughter will not be married until she's reached at least 18 and will receive an education. These incredible actions serve as more than just hope for the future of gender equality in India. Planting fruit trees has ensured that resources will be available for the expanding population of the village. With 60 to 65 girls being born every year, Piplantry has planted 350,000 trees. From one man's compassion, more than 250,000 trees are bearing fruit, and hundreds of girls have gone on to become independent and self-sufficient. This almost sounds like a morality story here. Planting trees to bear fruit, which obviously, is representative of females traditionally being the ones to bear children. And I think it's really beautiful to change the narrative from women being a financial burden and a difficult child to raise, to being this potential for life and this exciting birth story and positive thing rather than this negative narrative that's been around for so long. And I think this sort of rebirth and potential for the future is also echoed in the Bhutan story, the celebration being planting trees rather than, giving riches to the monarchy such as it was, because this monarchy seems to, as is a democratic monarchy, rules a little bit different than others, and they're not, demanding the funds and the gifts and such like that. What they wanted was something that was going to benefit their village as a whole, rather than benefit them specifically. I really liked these stories, and I thought that they were kind of different than the usual. So even though they didn't take place in America, I thought it was important to bring these to your attention and celebrate the fact that these things are happening and changing in the world that were something that we don't necessarily understand or agree with here. So there are definitely good things on the rise, and there is beauty in the world, and there is much more beauty in nature thanks to these girls being born and these trees being planted in their honor. So we are going to be returning back to America after the break. We are going to go to Texas, in a coffee shop in Texas, specifically, where some incredible stuff is being done thanks to a lovely, generous, kind business owner that understands what people really need and who the right people to give jobs to are, and is really doing some lovely stuff. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from our break, so don't go anywhere.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. When we left off, we were talking about planting trees in honor of girls being born. And now that we're back, a Texas coffee shop is being praised for building its business around hiring young workers who've aged out of the foster care system. The La La Land Kindness Cafe in Dallas has gone out of its way to hire 9 former foster kids who were facing troubled times after turning 18 years old. Since many foster kids are left without a support system once they age out of the system, many of them can end up on the streets, but not if Francois Rani has anything to say about it. The 24-year-old entrepreneur says that he was first inspired to launch the La La Land business model after he attended an informational meeting for a local non-for-profit serving foster kids in Texas. Not only has the restaurant served as a place of employment for the at-risk youth, it's also become a safe haven for community support system for whom all of the employees. We're not in the business of coffee. We just serve coffee. We're definitely in the business of kindness, Rahani told CBS News. He hopes that his cafe will inspire other small businesses to adopt similar initiatives. For 21-year-old employee Kiera Morton, who overcame homelessness and depression after joining the La La Land workforce last year, the experience has been life-changing. I have people to believe in me, and to support me. I've never had that kind of support in my life. So I've been able to believe in myself. And I realize what I want in life and to chase after it. In another act of unbelievable kindness, an Ohio church, the pastor in an Ohio church, the 3-minute sermon on multiplying blessings has managed to wipe out millions of dollars in medical debt. Back in November, Crossroads Church senior pastor Brian Tome told Cincinnati-based congregation that they could help alleviate medical debt for American families by donating $1 via text hotline. For every dollar donated, the church's partnering charity, Rest in Peace Medical Debt, could pay off $100,000 worth of medical debt. Since Tome's lecture was also live streamed online, donors from Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee collectively managed to raise $465,000, which abolished more than 46 $6.5 million in debt. Because of rest in peace medical debt, wipes out the debt based on the zip code of individual donations, the bulk of the donations was used to free 41,233 Ohio households of their debts across 103 zip codes. Although the fundraiser took place back in November, the church only recently announced the full impact of their campaign last week. Victor Martinez, a staffer from the church's Oakley location, told the Cincinnati Enquirer that the church officials neglected to publicize the initiative because they wanted to keep the focus on their compassionate congregation. Jesus, before we all knew who he was, he died for us to forgive our debt, said Martinez. And here, we don't know who these people are, and we're putting this money for their debt to be forgiven. It's not often that banks are praised for their compassion, but now Canadian credit card holders are rejoicing over their bank's recent decision to forgive all outstanding debt over 2 of their old Visa programs. After spending a little over a decade in the Canadian credit market, U.S.-based Chase Bank opted to retire their Amazon.ca Rewards Visa and their Marriott Rewards Premier Visa in March of 2018. As of last week, there were still Canadian cardholders who were making payments on their outstanding card debt. But when Chase, rather than selling the debt to third-party collectors, sent letters to all of their Canadian customers this week, explained that their debt had been forgiven. Ultimately, we felt it was a better decision for all parties, particularly our customers, Chase spokesperson Maria Martinez said in an email to CBC. Despite how financial analysts have been confused by the bank's decision to forgive the debt, Canadian customers are still in disbelief over their good fortune. Also, if you're in this position, we recommend you go check it out to get the best advice from real professionals. It's crazy, one customer told the Canadian news outlet. This stuff doesn't happen with credit cards. Credit cards are horror stories. Though Chase declined to say how much debt had collectively been wiped out by their decision, the former Amazon credit card boasts a 19.9% interest rate. And some Canadian cardholders told CBC they'd been forgiven for as much as $6,000 in debt. I was sort of over the moon all last night with a smile on my face. I couldn't believe it. This is a pretty incredibly generous thing to do. And it kind of restores your faith in credit card companies, doesn't it? It's, they're normally so villainized as companies. You know, they're only there to hurt people and get in people's ways and make people's lives horrible. But obviously, in this case, that's not true at every bank. This is so generous and so kind of these banks to do this, and really could save a lot of lives. So, well done, Chase. That's very impressive. And we fully are on your side here. This is very good stuff. So hopefully other banks will follow suit. And, people can be, forgiven for some of the things that they've had a harder time paying off. So that's just really lovely. When we come back from our break, we're staying in the Canadian region for a bit. because we're going to talk about food production in Canada and how someone is helping with waste management in that sector. So we're going to talk about that when we return from our break, so don't go anywhere.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about forgiving credit card debt. And now, did you know 58% of all food produced in Canada is wasted? 86% of surplus edible food is not donated or redistributed. Only 1/4 of food insecure households use food banks. The average Canadian household wastes over $1,700 of food each year. Canada's food waste generates 56.5 million tons of green household gas emissions. Processing and manufacturing are the largest producers of avoidable food waste, according for 43%. Rotting food creates and releases methane gas, which is 25 times more damaging to the environment than CO2. And with all of those in mind, someone is trying to alleviate all this. It's been 3 years since Tony Connolly barely had enough money to feed himself, and now he's making sure other people will not have to suffer from that same hunger. He's the mastermind between B12 Give, an Uber Eats style project that rescues leftover food from catering events and donates it to homeless shelters and food pantries. Since he launched the project last May, he's picked up and delivered more than 11,000 pounds of surplus food to charities throughout the Greater Toronto area. Colley says he was inspired to start B12 Give after he landed a job as a part-time event manager for a catering company. Through the course of his job, he was heartbroken to see the amount of surplus food that was thrown out at the end of an event. So he started delivering the meals to shelters on his bike after every event. Now, retailers participating in the B12 Give subscription service can simply send a text to Colley whenever they have food to pick up. He'll then drive the food over to the charities within the hour, making B12 Give the first barrier-free food diversion program in Canada. While working as an event manager for one of Toronto's top caterers, founder Tony Colley noticed a surplus of edible food being thrown out on a regular basis. The surplus occurred whenever guest counts were less than expected, leaving his employer no other option than to dispose of perfectly good food. Over the next few weeks, he began to voluntarily rescue the food and redistribute it over to the nearest shelter in the area. About 6 months in, he managed an event where he had an abundance of surplus food that he was eager to rescue, However, the amount was so egregious, he became concerned with his ability to continually redistribute food without the proper resources. These concerns quickly turned into strategies on how to rescue surplus food from his events more efficiently, which encouraged Tony to develop a logistics program where he could rescue and redistribute food from several local retailers on a much larger scale. After doing months of research to Canada's food waste and realizing its impact on the environment, Tony visited more than 100 food retailers, asking if they had a system in place to redistribute their surplus food. The most common response was that they were reluctant to do so because of the assumed liability associated with food donations. This response triggered Tony to investigate a bit further, and that's when he found the Ontario Donation Food Act. This act clearly states that anyone donated for surplus food cannot be held liable if someone gets sick, unless they were fined for human consumption. Since food retailers are not in the business of selling inedible food to their customers, Tony decided to take active steps in closing the gap between avoidable food waste and the retailer at the same time. So how is it done? Program partners schedule a pickup via text. The text should be sent in a certain format. You tell them where it is, the business name, the street address, number of labels used. Redistribution starts at 6 p.m. until 100% of surplus food is rescued. The program description. A, number of rescues. B, A is 30 rescues, B is 20, and C is 10. Pricing is $10, $20, $50 per rescue based on your chosen program. We'll meet with you to discuss the program in detail and determine the best for your needs. Retailers agree to a 60-day integration period. Program fees paid monthly on the 1st. According to the Donation Food Act of 1994, consolidation period, liability of the donor. The person who donates food, who distributes donated food to another person, is not liable for damages resulting from injuries or death caused by the consumption of food unless A, the food was adulterated, rotten, or otherwise unfit for human consumption, or B, is donating, distributing food. The person is intended to injure the cause of death by the recipient of food, acted with reckless disregard for the safety of others. Liability of the director, agent, etc. The director is an agent, an employee, and volunteer, donates the food or distributes the donated food, is not liable for any damages resulting from injuries or death. The food was adulterated, rotten, or otherwise unfit for human consumption. They are donated and distributing food. Or volunteer did not act in good faith, acted beyond the scope of work, intended to injure, cause of death by the recipient with reckless disregard for the safety of others. The act does not apply to a person who distributes food for profit, and the rescues of surplus food, developing relationships with partners for food rescue organizations in order to facilitate the safe distribution of surplus food in a timely and effective manner, or explore the use of technology to help improve logistics and safety to direct surplus food to distributive points more efficiently. B2Give creates a circular economy for retailers with unsold food seeking to lower their carbon footprint while simultaneously combating food insecurity. What an absolutely brilliant program to not only reduce your number of your organic waste, but reduce your carbon footprint and to help others. It's all pretty incredible stuff. So well done for this effort, and hopefully more people will get on board with you, and this kind of program will spread worldwide, because we definitely need stuff like this everywhere. When we come back, an American athlete who is breaking records and making headlines.
Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about food redistribution to lower waste and to feed hungry people and reduce carbon footprints. So all very impressive and incredible stuff that is happening. Blake Leeper has never let his lack of legs prevent him from pursuing his passion for sports. And now he's fighting to become the first American amputee to participate in the Olympics. Since Leeper discovered his passion for track and field in college, he's gone on to become a Paralympic champion, an international silver and bronze medalist. Despite these achievements, the 30-year-old double amputee has been denied a chance to compete for Team USA in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics alongside able-bodied athletes, because the world athletes ruled that his prosthetic running blades gave him an unfair advantage over his competitors. However, Leeper will not be deterred. He's filed for an appeal with the Court of Arbitration for Sports to let him compete. World Athletics' decision to bar me from participating in the World Championships was a blow to all disabled athletes, but I will not be deterred. I trust CAS to recognize that I do not have any advantage over any able-bodied athletes, Leeper said in a statement. I just want a fair chance to compete. For as long as I can remember, I've dreamt of participating in the Olympics with the best runners around the world. And I've shown myself capable of competing with them. But I'll need the help of the court to make my dream a reality. Let's hope they give him a favorable decision. And while Lego bricks are generally considered to be toys meant for fun and amusement, David Aguilar used the bricks to build his own prosthetic arms. Due to a rare genetic condition, David was born without a right forearm. He's always loved building with Legos, so as a means for addressing his disability, he constructed the first prosthetic arm out of toy bricks when he was only 9 years old. The Lego arm worked, but it wasn't very strong. And 9 years later, he built another model arm that was so durable, he could use it to do push-ups. The 19-year-old is now studying bioengineering at the University Intercolonial in Spain. He also hosts a popular YouTube channel under the pseudonym Hand Solo. Very clever. Once David graduates, he hopes to design prosthetic solutions for other disabled children so that they can benefit from the same positivity he experienced with Lego arms. And in other news similar to that, an Icelandic boy who's fascinated by Legos built a 26-foot replica of the Titanic, the fabled ship that sunk into the ocean after hitting an iceberg 106 years ago. His replica is so impressive that it's traveled to a dozen destinations all over the world before finally being placed in the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And it will be on display for the next year. Brynjar Carl Biggesen first started playing with Legos at 5 years old. As he got older, he became more and more inspired by people using the bricks to build giant, lifelike sculptures. At the age of 10, he declared to express his interest in the Titanic by making a replica of the ship. With the help of his grandfather, an engineer, to make the blueprints, Brynjar started building the toy ocean liner in a warehouse near his home in Iceland. The impressive creation took 700 hours, roughly 11 months, to build, with 56,000 bricks and 120 tubes of crazy glue. The estimated cost for the bricks I needed to start the project was $8,000, and the other costs, platform, tool, glue, were about $2,000. We managed to raise $3,000 with crowdfunding, $3,000 with book sales and sponsors. The Lego group in Denmark gave me 30% discount on the Lego bricks, and some people donated old Lego bricks. Now, 15 years old, the youngster has traveled all over the world to give speeches on his autism and what it was like to build the Lego Titanic. What he says, this whole journey has helped me out of my autistic fog. I was totally unable to communicate when I started this project. And now I'm standing on stage and giving interviews. It's given me confidence. When I started the building process, I had a person helping me in school every step that I took. But today, I'm studying without any support. My grades have risen, and my classmates consider me as their peer. I've had the opportunity to travel, explore, and meet wonderful people. All of that from a couple Lego bricks. It's incredible what a couple little things can do to make a huge difference in people's lives. Even something as small as a Lego brick. So let's keep that in mind and try and do as much as you can to change people's lives in a big way, even if it's just giving them a couple of little Lego bricks. When we return from our break, we're going to be talking good news in history on today's date. So that is going to be March 14th, the day that I'm recording. So we'll talk about some of that when we come back from the break. So definitely don't go anywhere because these things are important. We need to know where we're coming from to know where we're going, right? I think so. I think we wouldn't be anywhere without history. I mean, think about that. So we'll talk about that when we come back from the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about tiny little Lego blocks changing people's lives. It's amazing how the smallest thing can have such a huge ripple effect and completely alter and change people's lives. And while we talk about today's history and the good news in today's history, I want to remind everyone that it is history. Times change and we move on. So as hard as things may seem right now, this too shall pass. Let's keep reminding ourselves about that as things progress. So today that I'm recording is March 14th. And on today in history, 60 years ago today to be exact, a British radio telescope in northwest England made history, contacting an American probe 407,000 miles away. It was the world's largest steerable dish telescope at the time, measuring 250 feet in diameter, which is 76 meters. It's still located in Cheshire since 1957, and it's the third largest in operation today. It has not only tracked space probes, but it's helped measure the distance to the moon and to Venus, observed the first pulsar and globular cluster. It's observed quasars, the first gravitational lens, and the first Einstein ring. And, part of time, it searches for signs of life in space for SETI. More good news on this day in history. Eli Whitney was granted a patent for the cotton gin, one of the most important moments in manufacturing of agriculture in 1794. Very importantly, Orvin Hess and John Bumstead became the first in the world to successfully treat a patient using penicillin, which wasn't until 1942. 1942, March 14th, is when penicillin was discovered and used successfully. Importation into the U.S. of guns deemed assault weapons was banned by President George H. Bush in 1989. George Bush Sr. The Lino operating version 1.0.0 was released in 1994. And in 2012, the International Criminal Court in The Hague issued its first verdict, convicting Thomas Legenda Dilo of conscripting and using children under the age of 15 in his rebel army. In Japan and Korea, White Day is celebrated which is similar to Valentine's Day, when men give gifts to women. And also today, happy 87th birthday to Quincy Jones, the influential record producer, arranger, and musician who is perhaps best known for producing multiple albums for superstar Michael Jackson, including 1982's Thriller and 1987's Bad. Since the 1950s, 60s, he's worked prolifically on film scores, 33 of them in fact, and he's earned 79 Grammy Award nominations overall, and won 28 of them. Jones was also the producer and conductor of 1985's charity song, We Are the World. In his autobiography entitled Q, he revealed he grew up poor and got into trouble on the mean streets of Chicago's South Side, but he took up the trumpet and was literally saved by music. His charitable works now help save others, including a re-recording of We Are the World, that he benefit the victims of the Haiti earthquake. And he was born on this day in 1933. One of the greatest thinkers of our time, Albert Einstein, was born on this day in 1879. Growing up in Germany, his teachers labeled him as stupid when he refused to study on what he didn't find interesting. When he was just 26 years old, he wrote a paper on special theory of relativity, and also 3 others that year that were revolutionary, including one that included E = mc squared. As a Jewish man, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist fled the Nazi regime in 1933 and emigrated to the U.S. The only subjects he did find interesting were math and philosophy. He finally dropped out of school at the age of 16, and he didn't fare much better in college, according to Writer's Almanac. Also today, born in 1948, the actor-comedian Billy Crystal turns 72. Known for films like When Harry Met Sally, which is my personal favorite, City Slickers, Analyze This, and of course, if you're a child or childlike at heart, Monsters, Inc., Crystal made it big on SNL, Saturday Night Live, and later became the most popular host of the Academy Awards, having anchored the gala 9 times. Maybe there's a possibility he'll return back if they ever get a host again. So there's a lot going on, a lot of birthdays today. There's a lot of good stuff that has happened on this date. So maybe there's some potential incredible things to happen today that I can talk about next year on this date. And, a lot of good things progressing in medicine on today's date in history, and, good positive things that maybe will continue and rub off on us in today's date. Never give up on things that seem bleak, because they will turn around and you will find the positives within the seemingly very negative. So don't ever give up. There's so much potential for good things to happen. And in light of everything that's happening right now, stay positive. Always stay positive, because we have to. So on that note, we are finished. So thank you for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please subscribe to the show and write a nice review and rate the episode. That really helps us. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you so much, and have an amazing night. And I'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.